Throughout the years, Konami's released a myriad of different skills for a variety of different characters. But the thing is, not every single one of those characters actually ended up getting a fully fledged deck from Konami. And that's really weird because a lot of these characters actually got enough support in order to make them a bona fide strategy. Characters that come to mind include the likes of Bandit Keith, Bond, hell, even Chumley has enough to make him a deck. So that got me thinking, what would it look like if Konami actually ended up making all these characters a bona fide strategy in speed duels? And that's exactly what we're trying to explore in this series of mine. So essentially the gist of it all is that I'm going to be taking every single character that has a skill in speed duels but doesn't actually have a bona fide strategy actually built in a speed duel box and or a starter deck. And I'm going to try and build a strategy based around what skills they have available to them. But the catch is, the deck that I built for these characters can only include cards included in speed duels. Additionally, it has to make sense with the character in mind. That means that a character like Bandit Keith shouldn't be playing a card like Jinzo in his deck just because it wasn't a card that was like related to him in the anime, if that makes sense. And finally, the deck I built for these characters should also make sense with the skill in mind as well. But now that we have our restrictions set in place, I would like to ask you guys that if you do end up enjoying today's video, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way of supporting me and I greatly appreciate it. But enough rambling on my side, let's hop on to Dueling Book now. Okay then, so second to last character in this series, and we have Viper. And I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. Viper was very difficult to work with, and one of the most unfun characters to work with as well, just for the very reason that the reptile pool is really lackluster, and at that, we ended up getting a character like Viper without any of his iconic archetypical cards or anything adjacent to that whatsoever. So we had to stretch the definition as to what exactly a Viper deck even looked like, and please do bear with me because of that very reason. So, if you are unfamiliar, Viper did end up getting a skill back in the Duels of Shadows set, and his skill is Cold-Blooded Tactician, which reads, once per turn during your main phase, you can change the battle position of all monsters your opponent controls up to the number of face-up reptile monsters you control. A pretty decent skill that is a weaker version of Battle City Sirens, essentially. So it's alright. What I ended up doing for him as a character is that I essentially took every reptile monster that was available in the format currently and then paired it up with a few other cards that were reptile adjacent-ish, and try to build them something somewhat cohesive. And this is what we ended up coming up with. For the monster lineup, we have Bitelon as a pseudo boss monster of the deck. It's Bitelon, there's not much to say about this. We have Gagagigo as the main beater of the strategy, Desferal Imp, I guess a form of recovery, it's still reptile, Gale Lizard, some utility monster for his deck, Grenadora as another beater for the strategy. And the last reptile for the deck is Loud Cloud the Storm Serpent, which is a pretty cool card, but we had to make it work somehow. And that's pretty much every reptile in the deck. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fit any more just because it didn't really fit the aesthetic of Viper as a character. We had characters like, we had cards like Gentlemander, which, let's face it, this would have been weird in his deck. Sinister Serpent, it's kind of a bad card, and at that, I had some cooler ideas instead of just adding in 2 copies of Sinister Serpent to do anything with. Screech would have been interesting, but again, you kind of have to pair it up with Sinister Serpent in order to do anything somewhat interesting. Toon Alligator doesn't seem like it would fit. And finally, we had Wormdrake, which I guess is generic enough for it to be in the deck, but it's a really bad card. Alright, now for the cards that I did end up adding in. We had Direct Iguano and Direct Protos as 2 cards that kind of work individually from anything else in the deck, and also they work as fire monsters for the Loud Cloud Storm Serpent. And finally we had Troop Dragons, plural, as the winds for this deck. That way you kind of have cards that work individually from everything else in the deck that still allow you to summon out this card, and I think that's kind of neat. And as I said, I had very limited options when it came to monsters for this deck, so this is the best I could come up with. Alright then, so now for the spell and trap card lineup. We have Foolish Burial in order to set up the graveyard for the Loud Cloud Dragon. We have Mirage's Nightmares as consistency for the deck. Also, it kind of fits him as a character, I think. MST to go ahead and pair up with the Mirage Nightmares. Offering the Doom kind of feels like an evil character card. Premature Burial, as a way to have some form of recoverability. Also, it kind of feels like a villainish card. And finally, Shrink kind of fits him as a character, in my opinion. Finally, for the trap cards, we have Michizure, Unending Nightmare, Lost Wind, and finally, Paleozoic Canadia, as cards that are pretty good for the deck and kind of just fit him aesthetically as well. Alright guys, yeah, honestly I don't have all that much to say when it comes to Viper just because him as a character was very underwhelming, as you can see. But I did have some suggestions for you guys if you did want to go ahead and tune up the deck a little bit. In this strategy, you could end up adding cards like Fissure if you really wanted to, and replace, I guess, anything here for realistically. Tribute the Doom, the same thing here. I think these two cards still fit him as a character. Wall of Disruption, I would have added this in, but my goodness, I've added this card to so many decks that I feel like it's overplayed at this point. Acid Trap Hole could have done an homage to the Viper strategy, which could have worked. Sakuretsu Armor kind of fits a villainish vibe. Nightmare Wheel, same thing here. And finally, the Forceful Checkpoint, it kind of fits the vibe as well. But yeah. The next video we're going to be releasing is Yubel, and that one's actually kind of cool to talk about just because I did something kind of neat for Yubel as a character, so stay tuned for that one. Also, if you did end up enjoying today's video and would like to support me, then leave a like and subscribe to the channel is the best way of doing so. But with that being said guys, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.